The Building Brands podcast is dedicated to exploring the journeys of industry leaders who have successfully built a brand. Join me, Robert Royer, president of Building Brands Marketing, and an entrepreneur who has successfully scaled multiple brands as we dive deep into the strategies, challenges, and insights that have shaped the success of industry leaders and provide you with the resources you need to do the same. Building Brands Marketing is a full-service marketing agency specializing in crafting customized marketing strategies for service-based businesses with the creative powerhouse to drive real results. Welcome to the Building Brands Podcast. Welcome to the Legal Leader series of the Building Brands Podcast. Today, I'm excited to welcome Brian Beckcom, partner and attorney with VB Attorneys. Welcome, Brian.
Good to be here. Appreciate it, Robert. Looking forward to this, man.
Absolutely. So, just tell us a little bit about VB Attorneys and its evolution. Let's just start with a little bit of background on the firm, Brian.
Yeah, so VB Attorneys, the V stands for Vuk Vujasenovich, and the B stands for Brian Beckcom, and you can see why we've shortened it. It used to be a long time ago when we started, Vujasenovich and Beckcom, because all the bars had this rule that you couldn't have short names, like you had to have the actual names of the partners in the law firm. So, but it was Vujasenovich and Beckcom, and then it became VB Attorneys, just because it was a lot easier for the clients. Last year was our second decade in business, which is pretty rare for a plaintiff's firm, quite frankly. What I see in the plaintiff's bar and also in the defense bar, but maybe I notice it more in the plaintiff's bar, is there's not a lot of loyalty, quite frankly. I remember when we started our firm, not to get to a side conversation, but I remember when we started our firm, back in 2003, I consulted with some kind of older lawyers, some plaintiffs lawyers, and asked them their advice on how we should structure the partnership. And I'll never forget, there was a guy named John Jost, a very, very good lawyer out of Fort Worth. John and I had lunch, and he said, look, if you want to build a firm, it needs to be 50-50. If you want it to be a bunch of people in a room or sharing an office, but it's not really a firm, then do eat what you kill. And I remember thinking, boy, that made a lot of sense. And the more I've thought about it the last 2 decades, the more I think it's true. I think most law partnerships are not true partnerships. I think they're just people getting together to do legal work. So anyway, we've been around for 20 years. We do all litigation. We do mostly contingency fee litigation. Anything that needs to be litigated or tried, we can do, up to and including murder cases. Last year, most of our 99% of our work is civil, but last year, I think it was the year before, my partner Vic got a unanimous not guilty in a murder case down in Fort Bend County.
Wow!
And then turned that very same case around, believe it or not, and settled it for a significant amount of money. So mainly trial law, and we do all sorts of stuff, anything that needs to be tried. So sorry for that long answer. But
it's all right. So over 2 decades. Wow, it's been an evolution of marketing during that time frame. So talk to me a little bit about, the marketing engine that you've built both early on and then how that's evolved over time to today.
Yeah, it's a great question. And every generation thinks, oh man, I've seen all the changes. So I say this with a little bit of understanding that everybody says this, but truly I'm 53. Our generation has seen maybe the most impactful change in society ever, and surely the most impactful change in the law. And that's the internet and all of the technology and associated stuff that goes around it. So when I first started practicing law, there was no internet. There was very little email.
Yeah.
I remember my second year in practice, I got something called a BlackBerry, which is a small little device that literally had physical buttons on it, a little keyboard on it. And you could send email, and it was like a little one-line email. It was the most amazing thing ever.
Yeah.
And the internet started coming out, social media started coming out. I remember the partners at this firm I used to work for, Fulbright and Jaworski, huge defense firm, would literally lay on their couch at night and shoot emails to all the associates. They were completely addicted to this stuff. But when I started, no internet, no real email. no smartphones, no social media, and now we got all that stuff. So I've kind of seen all the development of that, and it's completely and totally changed the delivery of marketing messages, but marketing itself doesn't change. The way you deliver your message might change, but the message itself is the same for all of human history, quite frankly.
And that's the more important part. This is what I talk about all the time. It's not always about the mechanism or, the channel of communication. What's more important than that, and this is what I think a lot of law firms kind of have it backwards in the thinking, is what's more important than that is what you say.
Yeah. What's your story, really? I mean, what's different? How's Brian Beckcom different than any other lawyer that went to law school? Like, why should I hire you instead of these other lawyers? There's a lawyer, I just looked at his website, and he said that he's got $20 billion in settlements. Why shouldn't I hire him? Why should I hire you? There's a lawyer that's on the news constantly, like all over the news every time he files a case. He must be famous. Why should I hire you instead of him? So your story is really important, because if you don't have a good story, then you're fungible. You're the same as everybody else. Like, there's no difference in consumers' eyes between one lawyer and the next. Quite frankly, to a lot of consumers' eyes, there's no difference between what I do and what a tax lawyer does, or what a criminal defense lawyer does. They're all the same. So I think the most fundamental thing you got to do when you're marketing has nothing to do with marketing whatsoever. Okay. This is something I learned from my mentor, and this was life-changing, what I'm about to tell you. So most people decide, this is what I want my business, whatever it is, to look like, and then they design their life around their business. That's backwards. You need to decide what you want your life to look like, and then design your business around your life. So, for example, to use me, I could have made way more money, way more money, if I wanted to. And I've known that for 20 years. But I would have had to make sacrifices with my family life and with some of my friends and some of the other things I like to do. And to me, that wasn't as valuable. The extra money I could have made as the time spent with my family, or the time spent with my friends, or the time spent playing golf or doing jujitsu or working out or things like that. So first, decide what you want your life to look like. Like, what do you value? What's important? Is it important for you to be in the news all the time? Is it important for you to have your names on buildings? Is it important for you to brag to everybody that you're rich and have an expensive watch? Is it important for you to do those things? If it is, you can design your practice around those motivations. But if you have other things that are important, that's going to dictate a different approach. And so do that first. And then once you do that, everything else, in some ways kind of falls into place. But the thing you got to get straight is, what's my story? Like, how am I different than that lawyer down the hallway from me?
That's great advice. And I love that. For me, I always refer to it as, and it's from a book, my for statement. What is my for statement, and what do I do this for? And then that's going to trickle down to the staff and ultimately to the clients. And it's all a trickle down cause and effect. And it's a really good point. I think one of the largest fallacies of entrepreneurship as a kid is, hey, I'm gonna go and open my own firm one day, or have my own business, maybe way before you know what your profession is, and it's going to give this I'm going to be my own boss and not have anybody to report to, which is a complete fallacy. When you go into entrepreneurship, you have more bosses than ever to a certain degree, right? And it's very challenging to disconnect, but you also can set the boundaries for what that connection looks like. So it's a really, really good point. I am curious, like, when you started the firm with your partner back in 2003, what did you feel distinguished, your story or the firm's story different that has still held true today, 2 decades later?
It's a great question. And there's kind of two answers to that question. The first answer, probably the most honest answer, is when we started our firm, we had no idea what made us different. Like we
Mm-hmm.
just didn't know. And it took a little while for us, Vuk and I, my partner, to kind of discover what it was that our, kind of our mission was. I remember when we first started, we were trying to come up with like these taglines for our firm and stuff. And so literally our first one was "Justice is our business." And I look back at that and I laugh because I'm like, how does that differentiate us from anybody? Oh,
Yeah.
it's kind of like when you go to a lawyer website, here's what you see. You see 20 million, trillion, quadrillion dollars in settlements. And quite frankly, most of them are making that up or exaggerating. But
Mm-hmm.
even if they were, who gives a you know what? To me, that's the equivalent of McDonald's saying, I've sold 20 billion hamburgers. So does that mean you're making the best hamburger? No, it just means you sold the most.
Mm-hmm.
Or you see stuff like, we're aggressive, we care about our clients, we have X amount of decades of experience, we specialize in X, Y, Z type of, it's all the exact same message, right? So one of the things that's always differentiated me as a lawyer from just about every other lawyer, not every lawyer, but just about every lawyer, is my mom died when I was 10, and I had to go through as a young child the legal process and saw firsthand how it affected my dad and brother and
Mm-hmm.
my mom's family, how it could benefit people, where the difficulties were, why it was important. And so, a lot of people come to the law because they wanted a good profession, they wanted to make money, stuff like that. I came to the law because a lawyer did something really good for my family and I wanted to do it for other people. So that's a big part of my story. But
Yeah.
another, you know what I mean? So that's
Yeah.
but nobody can replicate that, right? The other thing is I'm a purple belt. I'm about to be a brown belt in jiu-jitsu before too long. I can whip the
Congratulations.
shit out of most lawyers. And because I do it like every single day against guys way tougher than most of the guys that I practice against. So,
Yeah.
and I don't do it for that reason. I do it because there's a lot of discipline and exercise and it gives you confidence and stuff. But I spend a lot of time with my jiu-jitsu friends and practicing jiu-jitsu. That differentiates me from just about every single lawyer in the world. I'm an expert fly fisherman. I'm a single digit golfer trending towards scratch. So I guess what my point is, you notice that the only thing that I talked about that had anything to do with the law was the first part of it. The rest of it is kind of a human interest piece of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hire that lawyer that's the black belt in jiu-jitsu who is an expert fly fisherman and who has a passion for the law because of what he personally experienced. So, like everybody is unique. You just got to find out what's unique about your story and start telling that story. Otherwise, by the way, if you don't tell your own story, somebody else is going to tell it for you. So, um, you know, I think it's funny because I'm 53 and I'm on social media more than I would like to be, but I have to be because of my business.
Yeah.
And I've kind of accepted the fact, all you older lawyers listening and think you don't have to be on social media, you think it's cool when you say that. All it does is make you look super old. Like, because if you're not telling your own story, somebody else is telling it. And
That's exactly
I
right.
decided, a long time ago I wanted to have control over what my story was. So,
Yeah.
but
Controlling the narrative.
I'm
So,
going to control the narrative. Yeah, exactly.
yeah. It's one of the oldest marketing tactics. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I talk about this all the time. The importance, especially with firms that are not just massive firms where there's a lot of disconnection between the top partners and say the most at-line personnel within the company. Um, that people do business with people they know, like, and trust in the service industry, right?
Yeah,
And those
yeah,
things that you just mentioned, for example, your buddies from jujitsu class, if they're ever in any type of legal scenario where they're going to need a PI firm, you're the first one that's come to mind for them, as well as probably all of their buddies, because they like you, they train with you, there's a camaraderie there, and you're obviously, competent and you're good at what you do, or you wouldn't be going on 23 years in success, at least with your firm. And so that's like such a, a an under it's it's something that's like undervalued in law firm marketing, is the importance of relationships and personal connections, and establishing those personal connections. You can do all the billboards in the world, all the TV commercials, and that is not as personal as a relationship, or also just being authentic and real. So I'm assuming, and forgive me, I haven't done a deep dive on your social content, but could you talk to me about some of what that content looks like? I assume it's not all you just in front of a camera answering legal questions or giving legal tips 24/7, right?
No, it's actually nothing like that at all. It's more about telling my story to my fans. And, the other thing, by the way, the other thing about it is anybody that's listening to this, there's a great article by somebody named Kevin Kelly called 1,000 True Fans. And basically, you should look at it. You can look it up on the internet. It'll pop right up. Basically, it says it's better to have 1,000 people that really, really care about what you're doing than to have 100,000 or 1,000,000 that are just passive watchers. And so what you'll see on social media all the time is you'll see people with 30, 40, 50, 60, 100,000 followers, most of whom are fake, or they're teenage boys in Saudi Arabia, or they're completely made up kind of nonsense. And it's better to have 500 influential people that really pay attention to what you say. Those are the people that I kind of try to speak to in my social media. And it's more about my social media is more about the narrative of who I am, what I value, and then what I do. So I talk a lot. Like I have a lot of videos about jiu-jitsu, about golf, about cigars, family stuff. Texas A&M and the Corps of Cadets is featured heavily because I think it's by far the best student organization in the country. I don't even think it's close. And then there's some talk about legal stuff, right? And so, because what I'm doing is I'm kind of sending messages to my fans and the people that really pay attention to what I say. And I'm not just going to constantly talk to them about the Garcia versus Smith case in the Federal Circuit from 5 years ago. Nobody cares about that, right? They're like, Beckcom, I don't need to know about that. That's your job. But what they do care about is they care about if a Tesla is defective because the self-driving doesn't work and there's a huge verdict, and I can tell them about why that is and how to avoid those kind of defective cars. Oh, and by the way, here's a cool jiu-jitsu move I just learned. Does that make sense?
Definitely does. And it's ironic. I work with a law firm out of Florida, in the Coral Gables area. That is his whole. Just the jiu-jitsu component is his whole angle to his marketing. He's the jiu-jitsu lawyer. Yeah.
I love it.
It's a fun angle to play with. But so one would say, and this is what I get so commonly talking with law firms is, oh, I don't have the time to make that content. I don't have the time to do that. I'm extremely busy, which of course, right? Like all of us are in service-based industries all the time. It's easy to live in the weeds. How do you make the time for that, to create content like that?
But I don't. So, yeah, my dad used to say all the time, anytime somebody says they don't have the time, what they mean is they're not prioritizing. Everybody has literally the exact same amount of minutes in the day. Everybody on the entire planet, from Donald Trump all the way down to the lowest level person, has the exact same amount of time. It's about what you prioritize. And I prioritize getting the message out about who I am, who my firm is, and what we do. And so if you make it a priority, it's easy to do the content. And it can be even easier if you hire somebody else to do it. So, but I still do a fair amount of my own social media. There's certain parts of social media that don't feel authentic unless you're doing it yourself. You know what I mean? Like, so for my personal social media feed, I have some people that will post some things on it, but I'm also posting personally because it's like a combination of personal and professional, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
With AI now, you can get like stuff done about 10 times as fast. So I don't know. To me, I hear when I hear people say I don't have time to do this or that, I sit here and think, okay, I've run a business for 20 years. I've raised 3 kids. I've never missed a sporting event. I train jujitsu 5 times a week. I play golf twice a week. I spend 2 months in Colorado in the summer. And I do all that. Like, what are you talking about? You don't have time. I mean, yeah, you do. Everybody does. Yeah. It's just, this is important to me. So what I would do is for people that ask that question, I would challenge the assumption of the question to begin with. I think it's a bad question. I think it's a bad philosophical approach to time management. And, I would tell people just, you have time to do whatever it is that you care about.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I've always said, it's the same premise. You make time for the things that are important to you. And also, if someone doesn't have the time to do things like that in a service-based business, what it also screams to me is they don't have good systems in place, good systems, processes in place for scalability, where they're too much connected to certain components of their business that, the reality is you get larger and get more employees. Generally, you bring people on that are better even than you in certain areas of the business. So you can slowly kind of hand off those responsibilities and delegate to someone else. I am curious, Brian, to just just take it a complete different direction for a moment and just thinking in terms of scalability as a whole, maybe not just marketing. If there was one capability or one new component to the business with the highest additional value you could add to the firm next year, and this show will likely publish in 2026, but for those listening and watching, we're recording it December 11th, 2025. What would that component be if there was one thing you could add to really add to the scalability of the firm next year?
Are you saying from a marketing perspective, or
it could be anything operationally, anything that would increase scalability, not just marketing. It could be anything in back office operations, accounting, HR, anything.
Yeah. So you mentioned something earlier. You mentioned the word systems, and I'm a systems-based thinker. So that's what I focus on in the firm. Like, I'll give you a concrete example of this. We had a problem last week with a vendor that was billing us way too much. And we have systems in place that were supposed to catch that, and they didn't catch it. And so my accountant and partner and stuff were focused on figuring out what happened, which I was too. But what I was more interested in is how we get the systems and where did the system fail, and how do we put a system in that won't fail?
Exactly right.
Yeah. So the only way to scale, in my opinion, effectively is to design systems before you scale. And now I'm here to tell you that, like, from a philosophical standpoint, I don't believe that people can anticipate the future with enough accuracy for the plans that they make to really actually be implemented. Because what happens is you make all these plans, you plan all this stuff, and then real life happens, right? But the planning why is the planning important? The planning is important not because everything's going to work exactly how you plan it, but because it gives you a direction and a compass and something to shoot for. And then what I think the best systems, and I'm still on this idea from a well-known author named Nassim Taleb, the best systems don't break easily. Okay, they're not fragile, but they're also not robust. They're not strong. Why? Because strong things break easy. What you want is redundant, what's called anti-fragile systems. So when something goes, I mean, think about weightlifting. You're putting stress on your muscles. You're giving your muscles some negative feedback to break them down so that they grow back stronger. That's like the definition of something that's anti-fragile. Something that gets stronger with stress. Okay. And so what I want systems that the more stress you put on them, for example, the more cases we get, the better they perform. That's the real secret sauce is designing the system. But the point is whenever you're talking about scaling anything, I think that responsible way to do that is to map out, like, okay, for example, we're going to have 100 extra cases this month. This is our system for handling these. Is the system going to be able to handle that? And if not, what do we need to do about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I always preach like the second part to that I've always felt was important to communicate to, the staff team members is it's going to be a constant change of evolution, or it's got a constant pattern of evolution. So if I ever say, this is the system today, it does not mean this is going to be the same system. Very highly unlikely it's going to be the same system 6 months or a year from now. We're going to have a pattern of constant evolution to continue to have a better and more optimized system. And if you look at all the most successful companies, they're all companies who changed and adapted constantly on a fluid basis. And then if you look at all the companies that essentially got pushed out of the space, it's the ones that kept on trying to do the same thing, the Blockbusters of the world, so on and so forth. So, Brian, this has been a really productive conversation. Before we kind of start to wrap it up, you seem like, you've quoted a couple different authors already. One book you could share with our audience, service-based business owners, law firm owners, and executives. What would be the one book that you would recommend for somebody to check out?
Boy, that's a tough question because I can think of so many, but probably the one that had one of the biggest impacts on me was a book called No BS Time Management by a guy named Dan Kennedy. And I'll give your listeners just a little bit of a preview. Dan Kennedy's not a lawyer, by the way, but he's a marketing expert. And he talks about time management, but he has you do this exercise near the beginning of the book. And everybody, I want you to kind of do this. In fact, I want you to do this exercise in your head right now. How much money you don't have to tell me out loud. How much money do you want to make per year? And I'll fill in some numbers just so we have some. Let's say you want to make $1 million a year. Okay. That's step one. Step two is figure out how much time you want to work. How many hours do you want to work over that year? Okay. So do you want to work, 40 hours a week, 30 hours a week, 50 hours a week? What do you want to do? Figure that out. And then divide the total amount of money you want to make by the total amount of hours you want to work. Okay. So let's say you want to work 2,000 hours. What's 1 million divided by 2,000? Pulling up your calculator right now.
So it's 500.
So the value of your time is $500 an hour. So every time you're about to do something, you need to decide how long it's going to take you and whether it's worth, let's say it takes 2 hours. Is that phone call I'm going to have worth $500 an hour? It'll really clarify when you're spending time on things that are worthwhile and when they're not. My time is worth many, many, many multiples of $500 an hour, many multiples. And so I always keep that in mind when I'm kind of deciding what I'm going to do every day, because my time is incredibly valuable. And so I got to make sure I spend it on the things that are worthwhile. Most people, I think, give their time away essentially for free. Even real successful lawyers, and they don't put nearly enough value on their time because they don't really have any idea of what it's worth because they've never done this exercise. But anyway, that's a great book about being real ruthless about managing your time.
Excellent. That's a great one. Good recommendation. That's the second time on this show that somebody's recommended that book, which is even
really
better. Yeah.
It's not a well-known book, so that's interesting. I'm
that's
interesting to hear that. Yeah.
So that's very, very interesting. But well, Brian, this has been a pleasure. Tell our listeners and viewers, where can they find out more about VB Attorneys online?
VBattorneys.com, Brian Beckcom, lawyer on any social media, YouTube, all the rest of that stuff. We are absolutely everywhere, for good or for bad. So yeah, just look us up, VB Attorneys or Brian Beckcom, punch it into Google or any search engine, and you're going to get probably more than you want.
Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure and a privilege, Brian. Thank you for being on the show. I look forward to continuing the conversation and talking to you soon.
Thank you. Great time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.